On Tuesday, the arguably most important election, at least in recent history, will occur. While the main focuses are the ongoing border crisis, the attempted insurrection, and the plethora of overblown culture war topics, arguably one of the most important areas is being overlooked and only coming into the conversation when trying to make unjustified cheap shots at the opponent's predecessor. But even though the rhetoric may not be entirely focused on the economy, the people's minds certainly are. Polls done in May 2024 by the New York Times in 6 battleground states determined that the economy was the most important issue for the voters, with the next two biggest issues, immigration and abortion, being a good chunk away. While neither side has been able to determine specifics about their economic policy, the people have chosen their man for the problem, as the same poll found out that the voters in the 6 battleground states decisively preferred Trump over Biden when it came to the economy. And even though Biden isn't a Democratic candidate anymore, Harris is broadly considered to be the continuation of Biden's economic policies. But what are Trump's policies? Well, even though Trump's economic policy is extremely vague, it can broadly be considered to be a mix of tax cuts and an increase of tariffs. Short tangent about what tariffs really are. It's an import tax. If a company like Walmart would import goods from China, they would have to pay the price, not China, and the price the company pays would then be forced onto the consumer, keep the margin stable and profit solid. This is important to note because Trump himself may not actually know what tariffs are, or more likely he doesn't say it out loud, as people seem to believe that China or the foreign country itself would have to pay the tariff, which is completely wrong. Since Obama, tariffs have been a bipartisan position. Obama's policies were called an unprecedented trade enforcement record and the most robust upgrade of United States trade enforcement in the history of modern trade policy. But Trump wants to break that record, and he even did in 2018, where he introduced a wide range of tariffs in his first term, such as a tariff on solar panels and washing machines. But the biggest tariff Trump introduced were the Section 301 tariffs on up to $60 billion of Chinese imports, targeting primarily the steel and aluminum industries. This being by far the biggest tariff, even being expanded by the Biden administration by $18 billion. These tariffs by far had the biggest impact on the US economy, as until now up to $200 billion have been collected under the Trump and Biden admin through the Section 301 tariffs, most of them being collected under the Biden administration. But how did these tariffs impact the US economy? While manufacturing jobs didn't decrease, overall employment did go down by 142,000, as American companies now had to scale down, as they were working with much higher input costs than foreign companies. They also costed the average American household an annual sum exceeding $600. What are Trump's policies for 2024? Basically, a continuation of his America First, economic nationalist and protectionist policies from his first term, but cranked up to 100, saying that other countries are, quote, ripping us off and stealing our jobs. His current plan is a 60% tariff on Chinese imports and a 10% tariff across the board on all nations. Again, his policies are very vague. That is why these tariffs could go up as high as 20% on US imports, which are worth exceeding $300 trillion. According to the calculations of the Tax Foundation, in 2023, goods imported totaled $3.1 trillion and imports from China $421 billion. With no behavioral effects, the universal tariff would raise taxes by $311 billion, while separately lifting the average tariff rate on Chinese goods to 60% would raise about $213 billion. Trump also proposed a 100% tariff on all imported vehicles. The tariffs could have drastic effects on the US economy. Tariffs generally pass the cost of onto the consumers, raising the price of consumer goods. The tariffs could, according to CNN, cost the average US middle-class household up to $2,600 a year, with the left-leaning Center for American Progress estimating that this number could go up to $3,900 per household, while primarily affecting the lower-income citizens who spend proportionally more on consumer goods. The Tax Foundation also stated, "We estimate that if imposed, this proposed tax increase would hike taxes by another $524 billion annually, and shrinking GDP by at least 0.8%, the capital stock by 0.7%, and employment by 684,000 full-time equivalent jobs." Our estimates do not capture the effects of retaliation, nor the additional harms that would stem from starting a global trade war. But why the tariffs? The tariffs have two main purposes. One would be to bring back industry to America, but the other one would be to finance Trump's tax cuts he had been advocating for since his first first term. It is still uncertain to which extent he wants to cut taxes, but we do know that he wants to renew his 2017 tax cuts. But he also considered removing the tax on car loan payments, social security benefits, and service tips, even going as far as playing with the idea of completely removing the income tax. Trump has argued that extending the tax cuts will boost the economy, create jobs, and help families. The income tax makes up around half of the whole $5 trillion of American tax revenue. Payroll taxes and corporate income taxes will count for another 40%, may also be included in Trump's tax cuts. If Trump really planned to remove the income tax, he would have to raise the broad tariffs to around 50%, to just covering his income tax losses. But even just covering the 2017 tax cuts would cost another $3.4 trillion over the next decade. In comparison, Harris's economic plans would cost between $3.2 trillion and $4.4 trillion over the next decades. And if Trump were to cut taxes on social security benefits, it would cost him another $1.2 trillion over the next decade. And again, we would witness a transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich, as the top 50% of earners, who account for nearly 98% of all federal income tax in 2021, would benefit way more than the bottom 50%, who only pay 2% of the income tax. This is why it's no wonder that the wide reception to these tariffs has been negative. For example, the chief global strategist of JP Morgan Asset Management, David Kelly, said that, quote, "It's one of those magical economic proposals that could actually cause inflation and put you into a recession at the same time." Goldman Sachs analysts said that Trump's economic policies, particularly on trade, would cause America's economy to shrink. And an analysis by the non-partisan think tank Peterson Institute for International Economies concluded the proposal would inflict significant collateral damage on the US economy. But this has nothing really to do with Trump, as tariffs are widely seen to be a non-starter. A study done by the International Monetary Fund in 2022, who analyzed the effects of tariffs when production is organized in global value chains, found out that domestic production generally does not improve economic prospects in protectionist countries. The home country tend to suffer the most from expensive intermediate inputs. Tariffs can have wide-ranging consequences on sectors and countries not directly targeted. Bilateral tariff wars hurt the two parties involved the most, with third countries sometimes benefiting on net from trade diversion. A great example of negative effects of tariffs were the tariffs on Chinese tires under Obama in 2009. Obama put a 35% tariff on Chinese tires after complaints from US companies. Summarized, cheap tires were flooding the American market. Obama implemented tariffs. Prices, as we learned, increased, with the prices for Chinese tires rising by as much as 26% or more, averaging up to as much as $39 per tire from around 31 pre-tariffs. This ended up costing Americans an extra $1.1 billion and 3,700 retail jobs. American tire manufacturers also increased the price by about 3.2%, as they initially had less competition. Companies profited in the short term, initially saving 3,200 US tire jobs. The consumers soon stopped buying the tires thanks to the high prices, leading to American tire manufacturers having to scale down, which had a negative cyclical effect on US tire manufacturing. Besides the short-term impacts, the tire industry lost 5,000 jobs, from around 60k in 2008 to around 55k in 2017. And the tariffs failed at their original job, as retailers would just import tires from other countries not being China at still cheaper prices than the locally manufactured tires. I have on purpose excluded the idea of tariffs worsening the relationship of America with any other country, not because that's not true, it's very true, and I think it would only increase the negative effects of tariffs we have already explored. I think this would, quite frankly, just be outside of the spectrum I want to cover in this video. But there's a bunch of other fantastic videos you could probably watch to get informed on this. This was a video I had on my mind for a long time, but like 4 days ago, I thought, yeah, this would be actually fitting to produce before the election, and now I'm here 1 day before it. I'm trying to finish it. Maybe it will come out later. I hope I'll maybe wait a good bit to edit it, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and go vote. Maybe you already have. Maybe you already have lit a few boxes on fire. Based ? Either way, Markus Weismann out.